Hey, IT Nation, Sean Lardo here with another installment of the Wise Up podcast. I'm back on again with my colleague, good friend, and co-host, Matthew Topper. Matt, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. The only downside is, as you can see, I'm traveling. There is no Duncan with me today, so we'll see how this goes.
You know, I see that as being a benefit. It's time for you to start to drink really better coffee in your life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I mean,
like Tim Hortons.
no, I said better.
Yeah, that would be worse.
Yeah, I mean, or the same. I don't know if you can get worse. We'll just put them at the same level. Anyway, so for anybody who has not a chance to see our podcast or watch us banter, can you please just in a 30-second pitch tell everybody what this is about?
Yeah, so IT Nation Wise Up is a way for viewers, listeners to get to know some people who they wouldn't necessarily get to see all the time, right? Not necessarily the big names on stage, not necessarily the people who are super public and post on LinkedIn all the time, but people who are often behind the scenes but have such really amazing things to contribute and that you can learn from, and just get a way to get them connected and get some experience and get some exposure to some of these new ideas that you wouldn't see if you just came to the shows and looked at the LinkedIn post. So it's a way, in short, for you to get something that you can take to your business right after the show and implement today and meet some cool people.
Absolutely. So today's a good episode. This is another one of our pitch it contestants for this year. I think so. Pretty sure. Yes, he is. Actually, he's a repeat
You should know,
offender.
Sean.
I do. Well, I was thinking he's a repeat offender. He's been here before. He's doing it again. I don't know why. He's obviously glutting for punishment. Um, got a chance to learn a lot about him last year, but I won't steal all the thunder because I feel like this is important for us to bring him on so he can speak for his own self or defend his own self and character. But without further ado, let's bring Mark Heather on, please.
Hi guys.
Hey, Mark, what's up, man?
Mark?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
I can hear you.
That's the whole episode done.
We're all done. It's over. Moving on. So, Mark, for those that don't know you, why don't you give a little bit of background on yourself and what you do as a business?
Sure. Obviously, you can tell from the accent I'm English, so that's always an advantage, I guess.
I thought you were Australian. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, we did teach the language to a couple of you guys, but you keep butchering it, so we've given up on that front, I think. But yep, I'm based in the UK. I'm the CEO for a company called the Compliance Aide. My co-founder is in the US, and that's a guy called Randy Lasik. I met Randy about 4 years ago when we worked together at a previous company that sold and built an XDR solution. Randy himself is the technical side of the business. I'm the business side of the business. He's built and sold an MSP and based it actually on the ConnectWise platform and did all the integration work with third-party stuff and things like that. We decided after working together that we looked for a gap in the market as to what MSPs needed for increased revenue. And obviously with relatively little effort. And we looked at about 3 different marketplaces. We looked at things like security awareness training. We looked at asset management, discovery, that type of thing. And we just discovered really that there were products out there that were already very good at doing their job. And there wasn't really, much room or any advantage that we could take in being unique. And we actually came up with cybersecurity compliance. And that's things like NIST and ISO and those sorts of frameworks. And combining that with artificial intelligence. And that's the if you like, the combination or the formula that we've put together. So what we do is we enable and empower managed service providers to answer cybersecurity questions without additional overhead, because the AI is doing that for them. And Randy and I have been doing that now for around 2 years. The last year, as Sean said, I'm a repeat offender for Pitch It, and last year I think we learned a lot. I think one of the big things we learned was generally in the marketplace as well was the people sitting on the fence because they didn't know whether AI was going to be a thing. And everybody was watching and things like that. And in the last 6 to 8 months, that's changed, because I think everybody now accepts that AI is a thing, and it is in everybody's portfolios. People are seeing it in different aspects of their life as well. So it's not just in IT that they're seeing AI. So it's becoming accepted, and the questions we're being asked are completely different to those that were a year ago. Strange fact, Randy and I, as I say, have known each other for 4 years. We've only physically ever met 3 times. That's the nature of business these days, I guess.
Yeah.
And that wasn't COVID driven either. That's just the way that everything works.
I love that.
So you're using AI to help with regulatory compliance. In what way specifically? Is this for evidence collection? Is this for maybe trying to determine if policies are compliant with specific safeguards? Do you have coverage? Like what? Can you give us some more details about in what way this helps you get through compliance?
Yeah. The company itself, the compliance Aide, we have 3 humans in the compliance Aide. Everybody else is an AI agent. So from a business perspective, we're an AI first company. 80% of what we do, if not higher, is AI driven. And the things that we're doing now with our agents is pretty much as you explained, Matt, is we take evidence. So any security policies, screenshots from platforms. So if you've got a screenshot which shows your antivirus being updated on a regular basis, we can take that. We can take a picture of a cabinet with a router in it or whatever, and the AI will tell you exactly what the router is, what cables are connected to it, what level the router is, all that information, and all that gets gathered onto the platform. And then our agent basically reads and understands all of that information and then aligns that to the questions in the security framework you're trying to adhere to. So it will say, of all the evidence I've seen, how does that answer question 1? And then it'll move on to question 2, and so on and so forth. And the output that we give, at the end of the day, it's outputs that are important. At the end of the day, what they're seeing is you get a gap analysis per question. You get a security rating per question. The security rating we do is compliant, non-compliant, or partially compliant. Anything that obviously you're non-compliant or partially compliant with, we can build a remediation thing for you, because it tells you. So, for example, if you can't find a password policy, as an example, it will say no evidence found, no password policy found. Your remediation is to get a password policy. You can then go to the platform, type into the chatbot, which is another agent, what is a recommended password protection policy, and it'll produce it. The outputs that we produce are all the security policies that you require. We also now do management reports on demand. So you can ask our platform, okay, you've done an alignment or an assessment. Based on the assessment, what's my financial risk? And can you break that down into specific KPIs? And once again, if it knows the KPIs you want, it will deliver that. If not, you can say to it, use industry standard information. And it will then say, your risk is X number of dollars. You're in the financial market. You've got a business of 100 users. The average compromise record costs $200 to $250. Therefore, your financial risk is boom, and it will tell you exactly what it is. And you do that just by typing in what you want it to do. And all those reports, any report you want, you produce. It's down to your imagination, and it produces it on demand. We've also recently added the ability to connect with people like ConnectWise, and we're working with ConnectWise to actually do this, where through things called, this is going to get technical and I don't want it to be, but MCP, which is Modal Context Protocol servers. You don't need to make API connections directly anymore. If you do it via an MCP, it's AI to AI, and that's what MCP is all about. It's about having a common language, regardless of the LLM, and it will read what's in the server. The server's doing the back end stuff to say, okay, I'll get that information direct out the platform. And so you don't have the evidence gathering issue. All of that basically from an MSP's perspective means they're hands off. They just push the button and produce the reports, produce any management report you want, and we can deliver that in 24 hours. So the time saving, as you can appreciate, is immense. But from an MSP's point of view, it's, you don't need, we still have a human in the loop. Don't get me wrong, because from an AI perspective, when it's answering questions, it's sort of, if there's 4 parts, for example, to a question, then AI will try to answer all 4 parts. Now, it might say that you're partially compliant because we couldn't find evidence of part 2 and part 3. Now, you as either the auditor or even the account manager for that client will be able to look at that answer and say, well, actually, I know that parts 2 and 3 aren't relevant for this client. So I can upgrade that partially compliant to fully compliant. And then you might want to submit all your documentation to an auditing company to sign it off, because we can't give you an ISO certificate or a SOC 2 certificate. But what we do is give you all the documentation. So we're like a paralegal to the lawyer. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of basically saying, yes, we do answer all the questions, and we've got somewhere in the region now 350 compliance frameworks that we cover for all of that information at a single click of a button, pretty much. And
no, that wasn't long-winded, Mark, at all. It wasn't long-winded. I mean, our whole podcast is over, but thank you for that. That was great.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions just on that same track about how you handle a particular, I won't get into specific frameworks, but how do you handle in an AI type model things like compensating controls, or things that, like if you're showing an auditor, you might show evidence that, well, this doesn't apply because the way I've configured it makes it impossible, or things like that. And kind of in a similar vein, how do you deal with evidence collection for things like say you're doing SOC 2 and you're talking about SDLC? I have GitHub configured to require 2 approvers, so there's the security review right there. Can you get that kind of external evidence as well?
Yeah, I mean, we can plug into anything that you give us access to. So we're looking for any form of information, and obviously, the more you give us, the better the responses are going to be. So the way to look at the platform is as if it's a human auditor. That's, and anything you would ask a human auditor or give a human auditor in the form of evidence is exactly how the agent's going to respond. And we're not single agent, we're multi-agent. So, we're in an agentic platform. So, when we say it's an agent, there's about a dozen agents behind the scenes working on getting answers and checking things through and producing outputs.
So you mentioned there's somebody still involved. You mentioned that it's creating evidence essentially for auditing. How does that relationship take place? Like what's the process look like for an MSP using you guys using this to do this? What is their responsibility and involvement, and how does that also happen to go into the auditor and everything else? I'm just curious how that looks.
Sure. Like I say, there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is if we've got a direct integration into a ConnectWise platform, for example, then there's a button on the UI. You just push it, and it will go and collect the evidence for you. If if you don't have that capability, or they don't have that capability, then all that they need to do is, in the same way as a manual auditor does, is they collect the evidence from the client. That evidence, like I say, can be old security policies, it can be screenshots, it can be whatever it happens to be. Once they've got that and they've put it into a folder on their desktop or whatever, from our perspective, the onboarding part is, if you can upload a document, then that's your onboarding process from Compliance Aide, because all they have to do is upload those documents to the platform and then push go, having selected whatever it is, the framework that they want to adhere to, and the AI takes over. So from an MSP's perspective, that's all they need to do is get that documentation, chuck it on the platform, push go, and wait for the outputs.
And I assume you're handling crosswalking and seeing to what percentage of other frameworks you're compliant with based on the first ones.
The way we do that, like I say, is we have over 350 frameworks that we cover. So, we can run multiple frameworks at the same time. We have semi-multi-tenancy. So, you can have one client looking after 10, 20 customers, and then another client doing the same, and all on the same screen. But for walking from one to the other, that we effectively start again. But you're using the same evidence, because where we've seen other platforms just taking an answer, say, from an ISO and saying that maps to question XY on NIST, it doesn't necessarily work that way. It doesn't necessarily tune exactly. So from our point of view, the way that we do that is, if you want a NIST and an ISO, you type in you want NIST and ISO. It's taking the same evidence, only one is going to map it to the ISO 27001 framework. The other is effectively going to map it to the NIST framework. If they're doing it, say, later on, and they've done an ISO, then they can use the ISO information that they have as the evidence to do the NIST audit. We could do multiple frameworks at the same time. So if you've only uploaded one set of evidence, because you're only going to have one set of evidence, you can push the trigger for ISO. 2 minutes later or a minute later, push the trigger for NIST CSF, and both audits will work simultaneously. But obviously, the answers are going to be reflected as to how those frameworks want to see the outputs. If you want to do one after the other, you can obviously use the evidence from, say, you did ISO first. If then a month later or whatever, someone says our American division wants to know how we stand up against NIST, you can take the ISO information as the evidence, and it will map it against NIST. So you can take it in any direction for any of the frameworks that we cover.
Are you making coverage or judgment calls? Like if you input a policy, are you trying to determine whether that is adequate to meet it, or is it more just, do you have the policy?
If you've got existing policies, it will look at that policy and update it for you, because it will say, if things have changed, for example, I'll pick on passwords, which seems to be one that changes the most. It will say, the current password recommendation is 13 letters and whatever. Yours is only 9. So it will update existing policies, as well as if you don't have one, it will write one for you.
How do you track things like requirements that say you need to regularly review something, or have a committee meeting, or like the kind of nebulous ones like SOC 2's leadership commitment kind of things? Is that you would input something like meeting notes as evidence and it would collect that?
Anything you want to upload, it doesn't care in that respect. Yeah. So, if the question in the framework says you need to sort of hold regular meetings, if you haven't answered the question that says you hold regular meetings, it's going to fail you. If you do, it will say there's two things. If you physically answer it, we hold regular meetings, on the second Tuesday of the month or something like that, and that's your answer, you're going to get a partial pass, because it's going to say, yes, you've answered it, but no, you haven't evidenced it. So if you've got the meeting notes that back that up, then you're going to get a full pass.
Fantastic. I'm the only thing I'm thinking about on the business side of things. You said something earlier on about people saving time. Who typically is your customer? Aside from it being an MSP, is there a certain size of MSP, and who within the MSP do you typically work with?
Right. Good question, because our market seems to be shifting all the time.
Right.
So in the MSP space, it's basically anybody in a regulated industry. So if you're in a regulated industry, you need to adhere to a framework that specialize in certain frameworks and just deal, that's what they do for a business. So they might be in the healthcare industry, or they might be in the automotive industry, and they've got regulations that they adhere to, whether it's something like HIPAA, or HITRUST or something like that for medical. The other area that we're seeing a big take up in, or interest in, is in the insurance market, because at the end of the day, insurance companies are looking to mitigate risk, and they're asking their clients, what are you doing to help mitigate risk? And the only way that really they can respond properly is to say, we are following. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be accredited, but they'll be saying, we are following a recognized information system management framework. And that might be ISO, it might be PCI. I mean, it could be anything, but that's what they're doing. And then that's how the insurance companies are saying, well, okay, you're following something, so you're going to pay this premium, as opposed to somebody who's following nothing. And they might not even get insurance. So those are two markets that we're seeing as being prime markets for us in the MSP space. And like I say, it tends to be that insurance is becoming very big. And the other common one now is the third-party risk management side of the business, because primary, it's a chain at the end of the day, and you're only as good as your weakest link. And a lot of the main providers, if you like, are saying to their subcontractors, what are you doing to protect us from being breached, or effectively you being the weak link in our supply chain? And they're some are being quite forceful and saying, we want to see that your documentation, we want to see what framework it is you're adhering to. So that's becoming quite big.
Yeah, well, if we accidentally go down the insurance and or third-party risk rabbit holes, this will turn into a 9-hour podcast. So let me
Exactly.
yeah. So we're almost out of time, and we always end the show with one particular question, and that is, if you could give a piece of advice to our listeners in the form of a habit, something that they should establish or something that they should abolish, stop doing, what would that be? Something to help them better their business, and in this case, specifically with their regulatory obligations or tracking their compliance progress. What should they do?
For me, it would be that you need to take some sort of compliance framework and run that through your business. You don't necessarily have to go to get the certificate, but you need to be able to prove that you're running your business professionally. It gives confidence to clients that, if they turn around and said, look, what would you do in the event of a failure? And you can turn around and say, we have an incident response plan, or we have a disaster recovery plan, and this is how we would implement it, and this is how it would affect you. You would get notification in such and such a time. So it would be to make sure that you're following some sort of regulatory compliance, and don't treat it as a tick once, put the book on the shelf and forget about it. You have to also test what it is that you're saying you're doing, because it's easy to say, yeah, I've got a policy which outlines how we would do an incident response. But until someone turns up and says, right, I'm putting the plug on this server, what are you now going to do about it? Then, you need to test that everything that you've said you can actually deliver on. That would be my advice, is to make sure that, your belt and braces on that.
I love it. Follow some kind of established program, even if you're not required to, or even if you don't go through the formal audits.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually test your policies.
Yeah.
Perfect advice.
That's the way the market is being. A lot of the frameworks now, if you've looked at them, they're moving more towards stopping it being a tick box exercise and saying you need to show evidence of what you're doing. So if an auditor were to walk in and say, okay, you say that you do patch management on every Wednesday, show me the log of last Wednesday's patch management. If you can't do it, then they're going to fail you.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Okay, so that is all the time we have for today, Mark. Thank you for coming on, man, spending some time with us.
No worries.
Good luck
fun.
this year. Good luck this year and pitch it. You win the 70,000, you can sponsor everything. That's what you said. So we'll work on. Hopefully, you're able to do that. But otherwise, look forward to seeing you next year in London. Matt, anything else we need to close off with here?
No, this is a really fascinating product. I look forward to learning more about it as Pitch It goes on.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
All right, then. Well, until the next time, guys, I'll see you all later.